It's a harp outstretched against the sky. A net outspread to hold the stars. The bridge as a whole is a symphony in steel and stone. A poem stretched across the straits. In this age of fast-paced lifestyles that include wallet-sized computers, flip phones that look like a Star Trek communicator, and wrist pagers, we're all bound to look for some sort of escapism. For some of us, it may be a trip to the wilderness, while others may seek a cruise on a luxury liner to a destination like Cancun, the Bahamas, or Milwaukee. Okay, so you can't take a luxury liner to Milwaukee, or any port on the Great Lakes for that matter, but 25 years ago you could. Large cruise ships were a common sight on the Great Lakes in the early part of our century. This is the story of the last of the Great Lakes cruise ships, the Milwaukee Clipper. Our story begins in 1905, 2 years after the Wright brothers made their flight at Kitty Hawk, and 7 years before the launching of the Titanic. This ship has a better fate. 1905 was the year that the American Shipbuilding Company in Cleveland, Ohio, built the Juniata, a passenger and freight steamship with an elaborate wooden superstructure that rivaled those sailing the world's oceans. Her main ports of call were Buffalo, New York, and Duluth, Minnesota. The vessel, along with her two sister ships, the Octorora and Tionesta, were the pride of the anchor line, ferrying millions of passengers up until the mid-1930s, when another vessel with a wooden superstructure, the Morro Castle, was set ablaze by an arsonist off the Atlantic coast, causing the loss of 134 lives. As a result, the Coast Guard banned the use of ships with this design. The Juniata and her two sister ships were removed from service. In 1939, though, two brothers from Michigan, Max and Mark McKee, operators of the Wisconsin and Michigan Steamship Company, were looking to expand their Milwaukee to Muskegon passenger and freight operations and purchased the Juniata. The vessel steamed its way to Manitowoc, Wisconsin, where it would be rebuilt into a new luxury liner for use on Lake Michigan. Her wooden superstructure was removed and replaced with a new streamlined all-steel Art Deco superstructure. She was the first new luxury liner built for Great Lakes service in the past 20 years. Her engines were converted from coal to oil burning. Other than that, most of her lower structure and engine room remained intact. However, everything above was state-of-the-art for her time. The new ship would be 361 feet in length, 6 stories tall, with a movie theater, air-conditioned staterooms, ship-to-shore telephone service, and having a cruise speed of 18 miles per hour. When the work was finished in 1941, the ship sailed to Milwaukee for her first Lake Michigan crossing. In Milwaukee, with the press and thousands of well-wishers at the dock, the new steamer was christened with a bottle of Wisconsin cream and named the Milwaukee Clipper. At the end of her maiden crossing, she was greeted by another enthusiastic crowd, including the Muskegon High School Marching Band and the press.
Factory and ship whistles blew throughout the city to welcome the new luxury liner, and for the next 29 years she would ferry millions of passengers and autos to and from Milwaukee, Muskegon, and Chicago. That's the way it was.
Over her life as the Milwaukee Clipper, she would be piloted by 4 captains: Alan Hoxie from 41 to 54, Barney Van Dongen from 54 to 60, Bob Prefer in the early 60s, and Carl Regan until 1970. Bob Prefer worked his way up from deckhand to captain. Retired Captain Bob Prefer.
Hoxie, I remember when I got married, I was third mate at the time, and one of the big problems was trying to figure out how I was going to get time off from Hoxie, because he believed, he says, if you wanted to sail, you sail. If you wanted time off, you become a farmer. You go ashore and become a farmer. This was a standard practice. You used to get aboard the ship when they fitted out, and you didn't get off until they laid off. So anyhow, I'm going to get married. This was in 51, and wanted to get some time off, and we were going out west, and I figured out to go for 3 weeks. And God, he says, how long do you want to get off? I says, 3. I was going to say 3 weeks. He said 3 days. Well, he didn't know if he could handle that or not. But anyhow, I meant 3 weeks. Once I got off the ship, well, they couldn't find me anymore. But I was gone for 3 weeks, and that was unheard of.
After the Juniata had been rebuilt into the Clipper, only a few items from the Juniata days remained topside. One was the Chad Burns signal device in the pilot house, and the other was the Juniata bell.
This is the bell, the original bell from the Juniata. It's one of the largest cast bells in existence for a ship. And there's this one and one other sister ship that's out in San Francisco in the Maritime Museum.
Grace and Henry Benton both worked aboard the Clipper during most of her sailings and into her life in Chicago in the 80s. Gracie as a housekeeper and Henry as the ship's handyman, and while in Chicago, acting as the ship's engineer.
They operated between Chicago and Milwaukee during the week, and then it started on the weekends. It would make a triangle trip. Then eventually they dropped the Chicago run, and it ran from then on between Muskegon and Milwaukee.
We started out about the middle of May, and by the time the holiday come along, we carried 1,000 passengers, not counting the little ones in arms, and we took back that many. 7 days a week.
And after 1950, they started running it through year-round. In the wintertime, we carried new automobiles, and we carried them all the way from the bottom cargo holds all the way to the top decks. They would strip the furniture out of the main lounge and out of the cafeteria and remove the dividers between the cafeteria and the main lounge, take the tables out of the bar, and they used to take up the dance floor, and we carried cars there. Then they had a ramp behind the bandstand, behind the dance floor area, and they ran the cars up onto the upper deck. So we was carrying about 200 cars in the winter operation, all new ones.
The ship actually was underway out of 24 hours. I'm going to say we were underway almost 22 hours on the weekends. They carried some tremendous loads. Just about carried a full load of 1,000 people every trip. So to get that crowd on and off the vessel and cleaned up in that short a time was quite the thing. As a matter of fact, Ernie Pyle made a trip on there, and the only thing that he had to remember about the ship, he said they needed 1,000 people with 1,000 brooms to clean up after it. But that's what they used to get the ship clean. The only thing good about in the wintertime, you woke up, you get up, and you go out on the pilot house, you look out, and you see cars on deck, you knew you were heading for Milwaukee. And if you didn't, you know you were going to Muskegon. When in summertime, you had a crowd aboard. Sometimes didn't know if you were going to Muskegon or Milwaukee or where you were going. It was back and forth. It was really a real rat race.
Life aboard ship is carefree. Relax in the sun. Dream your way across.
And then we had a young girl that decided to commit suicide, and she jumped overboard, but she had on a nylon dress, and the wind just folded that nylon dress right up, and it held her up until they got her. By the time they got her, it changed her mind.
Join the happy crowd. Experience all the thrills of a trip aboard a modern ocean liner.
This is the area known as the Clipper's Harem. Located in the forward section of the ship in front of the car decks, it served as the quarters to the college students who worked in the summer months aboard the ship. Another Schlitz?
They would contact the different colleges. They would send in, and if they liked their resume, why, they would write back to them, and they would tell them to bring the least clothes as possible, because they furnished all the uniforms and everything, and the quarters were small. And this one girl, when she come, got in her suitcases in the room. She couldn't hardly get in herself, and she sat on one of the suitcases, and she said, "Now, if somebody will tell me where the swimming pool is, I think I'll take a swim." Told her she wanted to dive off the Fantail. There's no swimming pool on here.
Now that you're familiar with the Milwaukee Clipper, let's step back in time and take a journey on her and listen to an old scratchy record.
We would like to take this opportunity to welcome you aboard the Clipper. The last call for breakfast is now being made. Luncheon is served at 11:30 and continues until about 1 p.m. when the last call will be made. Service in the cafeteria is a la carte, and you can choose anything from a salad to a full-course dinner. Dinner will start at 6 p.m. this evening. If all you desire is a sandwich, sundae, or an in-between snack, we would suggest you visit the Soda Bowl on the second deck, where you will also find magazines, postcards, candy, playing cards, films, and souvenirs. The entertainment will start on the dance floor deck at 1 p.m. with Jerry Hobley at the Hammond organ. At 1:30 p.m., George Crispin and his orchestra will play for your dancing and listening pleasures. Dancing will continue until the ship docks at 11 p.m. The children's playroom opens at 9 a.m., and programs of movie cartoons and shorts will be shown there at 10 a.m. only. And the feature movie will be shown at 1 p.m. and 8 p.m. Between movies, whenever reception permits, television will be shown. The ship will be in Milwaukee from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, or 2 to 4 p.m. Milwaukee time. During the 2-hour layover, a sightseeing bus trip will be available. Tickets for the 18-mile sightseeing bus trip at Milwaukee are now on sale at the ship's office. The trip shows you points of interest in downtown Milwaukee, and then takes you for a long trip along the lakefront. Finally, you will be the guest of the Pabst Brewing Company at Guild Hall for free beer, pop for the children. The bus will return you to the ship 15 minutes before sailing time. Tickets now available at the ship's office. At 6:30 this evening, we will offer continuous entertainment on the dance floor deck until the ship arrives at 11 p.m. Anticipating some of your questions about the Clipper and the trip, we would like to quote you the following facts and figures. The ship has a length of 361 feet, beam of 50 feet, and is 4,272 gross tons. Her oil-burning engines develop a maximum of 3,500 horsepower at an average fuel consumption of 5,500 gallons of oil per round trip. The officers and crew under Captain Hoxie total 108, of which 18 are in the navigating department, 15 in the engineering department, 3 in the purser's office, and 72 in the steward's department. All of the officers and crew live aboard ship. The ship's personnel you will come in contact with on your trip are mainly in the steward's department, a large number of which are college men and women. In the winter operation, 215 new automobiles are transported from Muskegon to Milwaukee per trip. During the summer, most of the new cars are carried by the motor vessel Highway 16, also operated by this line. The total distance from dock to dock is slightly more than 85 miles, and while on Lake Michigan, the ship travels at about 15.5 miles per hour on weekdays and 17 miles per hour on Sundays when 2 round trips are made. The average depth of Lake Michigan on our route is 360 feet, and the greatest depth is 924 feet. If you have any questions, we'll be glad to try to answer them for you at the ship's office. Thank you. We hope you'll have an enjoyable trip.
And now here's Henry Benton.
This engine is a quadruple expansion main engine, and what that means is that the steam is expanded 4 times. Each piston or each cylinder is a different size. But now everything's going diesel. There are very few steam engines left.
It was a well-built engine and very simple, but sturdy, and it did the job it was designed to do. And it wasn't all the vibration that you have with the diesels and all the noise and that, and it was a quiet, well-designed, well-built.
And that's your engine room telegraph. That's connected to the pilot house. And when the captain moves his lever up there, the middle needle indicates what he wants, and you move your outside lever to indicate that you understood his order. That's your bell signals. In case that the telegraph signal would be inoperable, they can use these signals in place of it. Another shot of the generator room. They're 50 kW generators. You have 2 of them, and you ran with both of them during the passenger season. You ran with one in the wintertime when you didn't have all the passenger area lighted up. The generators produced direct current. They were not AC. And we eventually got a small turbine generator to produce the AC power that we needed for the passenger areas that required it.
Now there's time to freshen up in the smartly appointed bedroom. You'll find private toilet facilities and comfortable beds comparable to any fine hotel.
This boat here didn't have a gyro. No gyro compass. It had the magnetic compass. And for a good many years it didn't have radar. And after he did get it, he kept the handyman that was on there then busy keeping that thing going. You could take and be coming into port. You look in there and it would show the arms of the breakwaters. And then as soon as you went in, then it opened up. And then that was it. You didn't see it anymore. And then they put this one in here to use in the port, because one time coming out of Milwaukee, the first trip of the season, there was dense fog, and
wound up hitting the break wall coming out there. It was a very dense fog. It was on the first weekend we were coming out, and it was really pea soup fog. I knew where we were at, but didn't. You knew we're close, but how close? And we're just feeling our way. And the only feeling we got is when we did hit the tip of the south end of the brake wall. We did break this stem bar, and it's a piece of steel about, I'd say, 10 inches thick and about a foot deep. And of course, we went up to Manitowoc to have this replaced, and it was a piece of special steel because of its size, and there was nothing in the yard except the tail shaft of one of the car ferries. And they cut that down and fitted that in to the bow of the clipper. That repair didn't take long, and we were back in operation.
Bert Halfpap started out with the Clipper operations as a steward and chief purser in 1941, right before the war broke out, and became the ship's superintendent a few years later. Throughout his 29 years with the vessel, he got to know Max McKee, the ship's owner, quite well.
I remember Mr. McKee as being very demanding in regard to passenger accommodations and service aboard the Milwaukee Clipper. In short, he wanted first-class service. He wanted everything to be tops. In the restaurant, we were to never use anything less than choice, and we often used prime. But no commercial-grade meats ever found their way there. No inferior liquors were carried aboard. He wanted the passenger treated right.
In the 1950s, the Wisconsin and Michigan Steamship Company purchased a World War II C-4 naval vessel, the Marine Star, and brought her to Muskegon, where they rebuilt her into the largest luxury liner ever to sail the Great Lakes. She was called the Aquarama. The ship could ferry 4,000 passengers and 400 autos on the route, but a dredging of the Milwaukee harbor would be required in order to accommodate her draw on the water. The owner of the line and the city of Milwaukee reached an impasse on the matter. Meanwhile, the Aquarama was placed into service as a liner between Cleveland and Detroit, while the owners of the Clipper line kept vowing to pull the Clipper from the Muskegon-Milwaukee run unless the harbor was dredged. Finally, in 1970, the Clipper was pulled from service, thus eliminating the cross-lake waterway between the two cities. Since 1970, the best year ever for passenger and auto transportation between Muskegon and Milwaukee, no ship has replaced the service once performed by the legendary Milwaukee Clipper. The vessel remained docked in Muskegon until 1977, when Chicago businessman Jim Gillen, along with investors, purchased the ship and had her towed to Wisconsin for needed structural repairs. Unfortunately, Mr. Gillen's partners withdrew from the deal, and the ship was tied up in court proceedings until 1980. That was the year that Mr. Gillen moved the Clipper to a berth at Navy Pier in Chicago, restored her Art Deco interior to perfection, and opened the ship for tours and parties. Mr. Gillen had hoped to restore the Clipper for lake excursions, but due to lack of funding and a change in elected officials in the Windy City, this never happened. In 1990, the famous Milwaukee Clipper, which had just been listed as a National Historic Landmark, was sold at a federal auction for a mere $335,000. The buyer was the Hammond Port Authority. They were in the process of constructing the Hammond Marina on the southern tip of Lake Michigan. It would be the third largest marina in the country, and they wanted to use the Clipper as a floating museum and convention center. The Clipper has been there ever since. But things are about to change once again for the Milwaukee Clipper. Recently, the state of Indiana legalized offshore gambling. Some of the financially strapped northern Indiana communities are looking forward to the arrival of a new gaming ship that will operate out of the Hammond Marina. And to some, the Clipper is in the way. A few individuals in Hammond are calling the Milwaukee Clipper nothing more than a rusting old hull of a car ferry. They couldn't be further from the truth.
Here she comes, the 361-foot Queen of the Great Lakes. She's the proudest vessel in her class. A modern ship in every respect. Clean, oil-fueled, 45 feet wide, and carries 900 passengers in comfort.
The Milwaukee Clipper is the last ship of her kind, the last of the Great Lakes cruise ships from a bygone era. Her lower section predates the Titanic by 7 years. Within 10 years, she'll be celebrating her centennial. How important was the ship to Lake Michigan? Former Clipper Superintendent Bert Halfpap.
I still do not feel that Muskegon appreciated what the McKee boys had done for them. Max McKee particularly and his brother Mark, they had poured thousands of tourists in there every summer. This had contributed to the prosperity of the whole shoreline there. Max McKee was a genius in defining the uses of an old ship to become a first-class ferry between Milwaukee and Muskegon with unbelievable flexibility.
It isn't too late to save the Milwaukee Clipper. The Hammond Port Authority is considering finding her a new owner, possibly one of her original ports of call, Milwaukee or Muskegon. The future possibilities for the ship are only limited by the imaginations of developers. The ship has spent her life in fresh water and is still in sound shape. Though it's a long shot at this point, the full restoration of the Clipper and making her a fully operational luxury liner sometime in the future is still a possibility. The Milwaukee Clipper is a vital part of Great Lakes history that is still with us and still afloat. Where will the currents of time take her on her voyage into the future?
And a beautiful sunset marks the end of a perfect day aboard the Milwaukee Clipper.
Good morning. We would like to take this opportunity to welcome you aboard the Clipper. The ship will be in Muskegon from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. During the 2-hour layover, a sightseeing bus trip will be available. The trip shows you points of interest in downtown and industrial Muskegon, and then proceeds to Michigan State Park along the causeway, which is considered Michigan's most beautiful 2 miles of highway. At the State Park, you will be driven to the top of the highest sand dune in southern Michigan, where you will have a magnificent view of the state forest lands. Thank you. We hope you'll have an enjoyable trip.